Hello and welcome to the Seattle Atheist Church. Atheists, agnostics, skeptics, free thinkers, questioning, and believers, whatever you like to call yourselves, you are welcome here. At the Seattle Atheist Church, we call ourselves an atheist church because you'll never hear anything supernatural promoted from the podium. And now, onto our creed. The Seattle Atheist Church was founded on the principles of scientific naturalism and secular ethics, which commits us, on the one hand, to reason and evidence-based thinking, and, on the other, to compassion for our fellow human beings. These commitments motivate us to oppose magical and wishful thinking and all forms of dogma, as well as to stand firmly against all forms of oppression. Truth claims are attempted here, and we stand ready to revise our thinking in light of new information. We attempt to be excellent to other conscious beings. We believe in good because good works in non-mysterious ways. If that sounds good to you, then you are in the right place. All right. Well, on with today's talk. Today, I'm honored to introduce a very special guest. Sasha Sagan was raised by secular parents, the late astronomer Carl Sagan, and the writer and producer Ann Druyan. They taught her that the natural world and vast cosmos are full of profound beauty, that science reveals truths more wondrous than any myth or fable. She is the author of the book For Small Creatures Such as We, an intimate, warm, honest, autobiographical book that discusses the central question of human existence. How do we define meaning in this vast cosmos? A book that Richard Dawkins has described as, quote, a charming book, ringing with the joys of existence, end quote. Just out of curiosity, can you give a thumbs up if you've read the book? I'm just wondering how many people have read the book. Fantastic.
No pressure.
Bunch of people out there. Are we seeing thumbs up? All right. Good. I see some people out there. If you haven't read the book, shame on you. Go off, read the book. We've been reading it together as a family. It's a really great book. It's a really enjoyable read. I've strongly recommend it. Athena, can you paste the link in for the book in chat? So Sasha is going to be giving a brief talk today, and we're going to follow it up by a virtual discussion. And Sasha, I will give the floor over to you.
Thank you so much. Thank you for inviting me. This is such a lovely place to be virtually, and I'm just so delighted to be speaking to you, and happy birthday, Laura. I just, for a person who has spent a lot of time reading and researching and wondering and writing about how we can bridge the gap between those needs we have to be a part of a community and be part of traditions and rituals that give us continuity and help us process so much change that exists in our daily lives. This is such a joyous thing for me to be part of a community who has done that within the lens of, the scientific and skeptical view of things, where, I was raised in a household where science, the scientific method, was the pathway to understanding, not just, a list of facts to be compared and contrasted with other facts, but this deep source of beauty and joy and connectivity with one another and with all the grandeur around us. And I feel so grateful that my parents brought me up that way. But another element of that is there are still these parts of life, celebrations, coming of age, wedding, changes, the changing seasons, all, and perhaps most of all, grief, that we have to reckon with. And traditionally, the infrastructure for a lot of that has been religious. So the question of what do we do to still have those rhythms that are part of life on earth and still honor those changes and sort through our emotions as they come in those moments within the context of critical thinking, as I was very much raised with the idea of skepticism, but not cynicism. So that's sort of what led me to write this book. And I'm going to read a few pages to you and then talk a little more before we'll open it up to discussion. But I have to say, you know, over the last year, I've talked to a lot of groups of people about my book, some religious groups, some secular groups, but I think very few groups who marry both elements of having these rituals in a secular lens. So I'm really excited to be here. And, you know, this may be preaching to the choir, but not the choir, you know, in a way that I haven't done before. So let me read a few pages to you, if you don't mind. As I see it, here we are on this rock that orbits a star in a quiet part of a spiral galaxy, somewhere in the great wide vastness of space and time. On our rock, events, changes, and patterns have an enormous impact on us Earthlings. They are important to us. We have spent a lot of time trying to decode them, to manage our expectations, to predict what's coming, to grow, to thrive, to survive. No matter when or where on Earth we live, we humans tend to schedule our most important events around the same time. Sure, Christmas and Hanukkah often fall around the same week, but so does the Dongzi Festival in China, Umkose Wokoshama among the Zulu, Yalda in Iran, and Soyal among the Hopi of the American West. And it's not just certain times of year, it's certain times of life too. Cultures from the Amish to the Maasai have coming-of-age rituals that at their core are the same as any bar mitzvah, quinceañera, or sweet 16 you've ever been to. Not to mention the vast array of human ways to welcome a newborn, marry a couple, honor the dead. Ecstatic joy to deepest sorrow, the heart of these rituals lies beyond belief. While our calendars have shifted and our climates, politics, and superstitions vary, somewhere in the depths of whatever you celebrate, there is very likely a kernel of some natural occurrence. We needn't resort to myth to get that spine-chilling thrill of being part of something grander than ourselves. Our vast universe provides us with enough profound and beautiful truths to live a spiritually fulfilling life. Nature is full of patterns, and we humans love finding them, creating them, repeating them. That's at the core of language, math, music, and even ritual, which is the repetition of words or actions deemed worthy of representing something bigger than ourselves. Some rituals are very private, some are very public, some are so commonplace we don't even think of them as rituals. My view is that all over the world and across time, these are all a form of art, an elaborate performance or a secret poem, all vital in their ability to help us face the nature of time and change, life and death, and everything else we cannot control. So much of human culture is designed to help us come to terms with the most astonishing elements of existence. Every single one of us appears seemingly from nowhere and then eventually returns to nowhere. We are conceived, we grow, and we die. But what happens beyond that is a great and haunting mystery. We grapple with it by marking how and when things change here on Earth, both cyclically and permanently. I believe rich, meaningful rituals can be modern. You can invent one tomorrow. It's just the way things have always been, is all too often used to exclude or demean or justify the odious. An old tradition is not intrinsically better than a new one, especially when it's such a joy to make up new ones that reflect exactly what you believe, ones that make sense of your life as you experience it, ones that bring the world a little closer to the way you wish it could be. It's not always easy to start something from scratch, though. It can feel a little contrived, a little ridiculous. You can lose that sense of inclusion in a community, being part of a legacy. Without going full tevye, there is something deeply reassuring about performing the specific steps, the exact motions that your grandparents performed, that they learned from their grandparents. You say a prayer, you light a candle, you make a dessert just the way they did, and imagine the nameless generations stretching back into the past. There is a pleasure in this. It's a kind of connectedness, a kind of time travel, providing a sense of certainty in what's tried and true. That's why new cultures are so often built upon existing cultures. Elements are borrowed, repurposed, reinterpreted, appropriated, stolen, or used to quell unwilling converts. Some new secular scientific tradition would undoubtedly borrow from the theistic ones. For example, throughout this book, I have found it impossible not to use the language of belief. Words like sacred, magical, and spiritual come from theism, but they describe the same feeling even when it's elicited by the understanding of scientific phenomena. These words are evolving with our understanding of our place in the splendor of existence. For years, people told me that once I had children, I would become more religious. These weren't fervently religious people necessarily. In most cases, they were not even believers, just people who felt that children need traditions and that that's what religion provides. I would usually get a little defensive, but they were partially right. I do now have an increased urge to celebrate things with our daughter. I love and have always loved special occasions, the break from monotony, a reason to put on a dress, the banter, feasts, merriments, and the feeling of being part of a group. I love parties, the marking of time, the sensation of feeling it pass, and I want to provide that for my child. I want to make her face light up. I want to evoke that gleeful giggle, that sense of wonder that makes life on earth feel so magical, so intentional when you're little. But I can't go through the motions. I can't bring myself to tell her anything that I don't think is true. So I find myself eager to map out a year that is sometimes inspired and informed by the practices and beliefs of her ancestors on both sides, but not shackled by them. I want to create moments that make us feel united with other earthlings without the dogma that divides us. Religion, at its best, facilitates empathy, gratitude, and awe. Science, at its best, reveals true grandeur beyond our wildest dreams. My hope is that I can merge these into some new thing that will serve my daughter, my family, and you, dear reader, dear listener, as we navigate and celebrate the mysterious beauty and terror of being alive in our universe. So I most of the time when I read something like that to a group of people, it's very different than maybe what they're used to. But it sounds like I happen to be among people who have a very similar outlook, and so I'm really eager to open up the conversation. But I'll just share two other things before I do. One is that I think that right now in this moment where here we are on Zoom and we're so separated and we're having all of these events without the rites of passage and rituals that go along with them. I mean, the most heart-wrenching is, of course, how many people have lost their lives and the inability for their loved ones to have a funeral or have all, be together, even if it's not a traditional funeral, but have the embrace and the reassurance of being in a group. And I think that this moment, from that extreme to the much less emotionally fraught, but still important, weddings and graduations and all these moments where all of a sudden we're very aware that even though, you can still go get your marriage license filled out, you still get your diploma and you're done with school, but the experience of sort of going through the portal is different without these group events. And I think that everyone, whether they're very devout or secular or somewhere in between, we're all becoming very aware of this in this moment, how much these events mean to us and how much they help us process change, even if it's something that, you know, we weren't so aware before was critical to us. And so for those of us who are secular or non-believers, I think it also makes it clear that, you know, even though sometimes it's hard to separate some of these events and holidays from their religious origins, we still do rely on them, and we still do need these celebrations and rituals and traditions. And so I think it's a very interesting time to think about that. And then I'll just also say that maybe this is a good topic for people to share once they open up, but you know, once we open up the conversation. But I think that there are a lot of rituals that we do privately in our families and in our homes that maybe we don't think of as rituals. And, you know, in the before times when we would, let's say you had, you know, happy hour once a week with your colleagues, or you know, you had game night with your family and things like that. And now, you know, things that are even very simple and very small, I think people are relying much more, you know, it's like this weird period of time where the days blend together. And if you're not going anywhere and you're not in your normal routine, you know, especially at the beginning in the spring when it just felt like one day was running into the next, people started sort of doing things to just break up time and think, okay, I got to do this every morning, whether it was like an online yoga routine or something like that, where or I have to go for a walk every day or just get outside, just to sort of feel time passing. And I think that there are all these sort of smaller, more personal rituals that we don't necessarily think of in that context, but are. And so I'll just share one of my favorites in our family, which is a little backstory. A few years ago, my husband and I were in Washington, D.C., and we were going to dinner, and we got into a taxi, and we were like having a conversation about like, should he change his job? Well, it's a good job, but it's not really what he wants to do. Like the same conversation you have like 100,000 times. And the driver was like, how long have you been married? And we were like, 6 weeks. And he was like, 6 months. And we were like, no, 6 weeks. And he was like, oh, and he like let out this like low sound. We were like, here comes a whole bunch of unsolicited advice. But instead he broke into song to our everlasting astonishment. And he started singing like this medley of like Janis Joplin numbers, but also like traditional songs. He was from Sierra Leone, that we, you know, eventually learned we're from Sierra Leone. And he was like, do you sing? And we were like, no, like what? No. And he was like, you have to sing. It's really, really important. And he was like, A, B, C, D. And we were like, E, F, G. And by the end, like he got us really into it. And like by like XYZ, we were like 100% committed, singing the alphabet song with all of our hearts with this gentleman who we had never met before. And he was like, you have to sing together. It's really, really important. And we were like, okay, yes, we will do that. And this is like 7 years ago. And every weekend, my husband and I have sung the alphabet song together. And it's like a lot less weird now because now we have a toddler, which is a good cover. But for a while, it was just two people in their mid-30s singing the alphabet song every Saturday morning. But we've really stuck with it because he was so right about, and I don't know if this is what this gentleman intended, but there's something about bringing down your defenses and doing something that's a little bit silly, and also doing something that you don't always feel like doing, but still doing it even when you don't feel like it. And then you're in a rush or you're grumpy or you're whatever, or we do it when, I mean, again, in the before times, if one of us was away, we would do it over the phone, you know, and like that idea of having that rhythm and bringing you back to something that's a value of yours, you know, in this case, our relationship, our marriage, our closeness and saying, well, we're going to just stick with this and do this thing every week, even if we're not in the mood to sing the alphabet song. And, you know, it's very quick. It's very easy. You can do it while you're, you know, in the car, whatever it is, but it's really proven very valuable to us. And I really do think of it as a ritual. And so that's something that, I mean, we did it yesterday. It's like a really solid, regular set part of our life after all these years, that this wonderful, slightly nosy stranger, you know, bequeathed to us in a like 15-minute car ride. So one of the things I'm curious about is just, you know, how new rituals happen, how they stick. You guys are obviously a group of people who have managed to create a new ritual in some ways on the shoulders of a previous belief system, it being a Sunday morning service, you know, but in other ways, it's something totally new. So maybe that's, I'm curious to know from a group of experts who have been doing this, what do you think helps make some of these rituals stick and what sort of falls away? Because that's a question I get asked a lot, but I'm curious what you think. So maybe this is a good time to open up the conversation a little bit and hear some thoughts.
Thank you, Sasha. Yeah, let's give a quick round of applause for
Thank
Sasha
you.
before we jump into the
Thanks.
question and answer period. You can unmute yourself if you want to, but I see a lot of people applauding.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you.